physics video. Yeah, I'm just gonna make this because I don't know if I got what it takes to explain this one, but anyway, I watched a couple of this Michio Kaku guy, Kaku, and I really don't like him. I don't know whether it's a style thing, what exactly it is. The fact that he's, born in America and he still kind of speaks like a foreigner. He's a protege of Edward Teller, which is just, the craziest motherfucker ever. I mean, he was he would have bombed Russia. That's, he was crazy. The guy who provoked us into wasting, by now, maybe $1 trillion on missile defense systems, This silly fucker. Anyway, that's who got this guy into Harvard. It was Teller, the guy who helped invent the bomb that blew up Japan. I don't know. This all doesn't make much sense. But anyway, it's just something. He just talks about it like we physicists, we this, we. And it's all this name-droppy stuff and all this historical stuff instead of just getting to any kind of real physics. And so I've watched two videos. One was this Big Think one's 4,700,000 views. It's, the universe in a nutshell, a piece of crap. And he's this string theory kook with all this wormhole bullshit. He keeps weaseling this wormhole shit into every fucking, he did it. So I watched another video on time. And, it's just awful. But and so the evidence, the proof, of Einstein's time variance theory, or whatever you want to call it, is the muon thing. Where the cosmic rays hit the atmosphere, they knocks these particles loose. They have a decay rate that's really quick. Decay means either it falls apart and flies into subatomic particles, or else it decays into something more stable like a proton or a neutron or some other atomic particle. So I don't know what exactly muons decay into, but it doesn't really matter. The point is the decay rate is too slow, as they, and so he goes to the top of some fucking Andes or something to, I guess the Swiss Alps or whatever. But anyway, it's all just this show shit. I'm so sick of documentaries. It's all the show and the graphics and the crap, and the physics is just, it's completely secondary. I'm just so sick of it. I'm sick of ads too. Like his videos have ads all over them, in them, horrible. Anyway, it's just really dislikable crap. So anyway, the time one really bugged me. Anyway, so the muon thing is a perfect example of what I've been arguing, is that time doesn't change. Gravity is still moving the speed of gravity. Light is still moving the speed of light. All things are still happening the same way they happened before. The only thing that's changed is that the physical structures that are moving, like when you have to move an atom, people have this idea that these invisible forces just lock everything together, and so when you move one little piece of the atom, the whole atom comes with it. But that's not how it works. It's not free. The movement isn't free. You can't just move the piece and the whole thing comes with it. Every little piece of movement has to be distributed into every single element of that atom to move that atom. The entire atom has to be, each little piece has to actually, you have to think of the atom like a bunch of chairs or something. You can't just move one chair and you're done. The movement of the chair has to be bisected, cut into little tiny pieces, and distributed through the whole thing. And because that movement is a system thing, it'll just recycle and just keep happening. You move the one chair, all the other chairs move a little tiny bit. Then the one chair movement moves again, and it's just, it'll always exist in the system. So you have to think of these as systems, closed systems, and all you're doing is kind of creating an imbalance in the system, and that imbalance will just keep generating. So I'm trying to think of good metaphors, and I think some of the ones I've come up with were good. The dancing one, for example, I think is a winner. If you're dancing, and then I ask you to move left or right as you're dancing, you'll understand that you have to dance slower. You won't be able to do the same, you won't be able to dance with the same speed because you now have to waste some time moving. And it takes time to distribute the energy of one little tiny bit moving. So if I move the electron, say, 5 feet that way, you know, from atom size, you know what I'm saying, I move the electron a little bit, and we say, okay, now the whole atom will have to adjust to this new position. You can, you know, I'm saying that you have to sort of understand that it's going to take time for that movement to be distributed to that whole atom. How to explain this? You know, it's just not free. It's just not like they're all connected by rubber bands. It's not rubber bands. It's not something elastic. It's elastic in its overall effect. In the end, that's what it looks like. But like I said, even an elastic, like I said, I didn't say it. Gotta quit saying that. An elastic band isn't elastic, you know, atomically. So it's a system. And systems have to, it has to get distributed into the system. So, I guess I'll mess with some drawings to try to explain it. But you have to just understand that it takes, when something's going this way, it can't be going that way, right? So if you've changed it where it was going, and now it's in this location instead, you've essentially taken away a bit of its time. Alright. So anyway, but the real point I'm trying to make is that there is no time dilation. There's just a slowdown in the metabolism of the atoms, the structure of the thing itself, the body. As you move, if you give me velocity and force bits of me to be going in one direction, it'll take more time for the orbit to be completed because I'm spending time going in directions that aren't part of the orbit. Can you sort of understand that? I'm spending, time is getting used up eating space. If you eat distance, it takes time to eat it. Can you get it that way? I mean, I've used that analogy before, but this is what's really happening. When an atom's moving, it's rolling. And that rolling takes time. It takes time for bits of it to go off in directions that they wouldn't have gone in. Alright. So I was trying to use this simple drawing as a way of explaining it, but it really wasn't going very well. But you just have two things coming in. And if you just take away the idea that direction of orbit matters, like the Earth could be spinning this way or the Earth could be spinning that way around the Sun. It just doesn't matter. Let's just say, and that's how these pieces work. But it will just change, everything changes. If the Earth all of a sudden spun the opposite direction, rotated the opposite direction, it would change all its relationships to all the other things it's gravitationally connected to, including the movement inside the Sun, its rotation. And it might do it in some sort of catastrophic way, but generally speaking, you could understand if you just broke it down to some general concepts. It's kind of irrelevant which way the solar system is spinning. So anyway, let's just say something comes into a system. So you have this closed system that's balanced. Alright, so this would be the idea of balance. So understand that each one of these arrows would represent, say, 1,000 arrows. And what's really happening when you gain velocity is that you convert one of these arrows, you know, into an arrow going this way. So now this one's stronger. You have 101 going this way and only 99 going that way. And that imbalance is what over time will just have this thing roll that away. But you can see how much time, how much distance that is. All that rolling takes time. And that's the slowdown in metabolism that takes place. It'll take you longer to make these rotations because you're going to have to go more distance to get there. Your orbits are going to keep getting broken, and they're going to have to keep rebalancing. It's essentially what you're doing is moving this center of gravity thing. See, here the center of gravity would be stable, but if I add these extra arrow, this one extra arrow, then the center of gravity has an illusion of being in the wrong place. And now this energy will have to be transferred to this to move this way too. So this extra arrow will have to be exchanged. This will go back to neutral, and the extra arrow will be placed inside here. So you see, so you have to sort of understand that if you have this complex system, lots of parts, that the extra arrow starts here, and it has to be transferred to here, and it has to be transferred to here, and it has to be transferred to here, and each one of those transfers eat up time. So here's a simple example: two things coming into each other, and so here, at T2, here they are, here and here, and at T3, time 3, they collide. And if you think about them kinetically just bouncing off of each other, then at T4, you can sort of understand that this one is in the same position it was at T2. It hasn't advanced any. So at T3, it's gone nowhere, effectively. It's in the same position. Now it's going in an opposite direction, but let's say direction doesn't matter in an orbit. The fact is it lost where it would have been. And now everything else is going to have to adjust to that. And what happened is really, this extra arrow comes in, let's say, from the outside. It does this collision. It exchanges its thing, and what comes out is an arrow going this way. So here's your equal but opposite reaction, your Newtonian balance, because it's the first thing that comes in, it'll make this exchange, and this arrow will go out. So there's your opposite reaction force, and here's your plus arrow, and your plus arrow will stay inside this system theoretically forever. You've added an arrow, and now you're going to have to give away an arrow going this way to get rid of it. You're going to have to equal an opposite reaction. Something's going to have to come in this way, and you're going to have to give up this arrow in that direction. But until that happens, this system will maintain its velocity. It'll maintain this constant switching, this constant exchanging of this arrow. So this arrow will exchange through all the parts inside the atom. And so this tiny nudge, let's say a movement as long as this pen, will be divided among every constituent piece of the matter, all of its mass. And so the movement, the actual movement, will be the tiny fraction of the movement that went in, divided among all the constituents. So one photon, like say you have a ball on a perfect non-friction surface. So it'll roll without any friction. And you just hit it with that photon, on the top, the top half of its circumference. And you just create that, in the initiation of this movement. Now it's going to roll. And what's happening is that one little piece of going in is spreading through the entire material structure, and it's being divided among all the constituents, and all the constituents are just moving this little tiny bit in their allotment of time where they possess the extra arrow. And it's really what you're doing is, by doing that, is consuming a lot of time, because each one of those interactions, you lose time right here. Time gets frozen because you end up in the same position you were, even though time passed. So but see, the word frozen just says it right there, because in a sense all matter is just frozen gravity. It's frozen, it's locked in this redundant pattern. And I mean, the force is the matter. we are the force. You know, we're made of force. The force is the real thing, and we're just a pattern in the force. And let's see how else to do this. So anyway, so what I'm arguing is that yes, there is a metabolism to atoms. There's a metabolism to electrons. Anything that has these things inside of it, energy inside of it. Energy are arrows. Energy is something moving. That's energy. And it's possessed in the matter. The movement's still in there. And if you're going to give something velocity in a direction, that means you'll consume a larger percentage of the time going the direction of that arrow and not going in the directions of the other arrows. So whatever rotation you had will now have to do this to get to this, to get to this, to get to this, to get to, you know, it'll have to do this extra arrow in this extra direction. So you'll add one quanta of time, you know, slowing things down. That's not a good way to say it, one quanta at a time. And you're not adding, you're subtracting a balance. And once you subtract the balance, the real time thing is in just the switch of direction. You know, the switch from going this way to going this way to going this way to going this way. This is what's consuming the time, is the reversing direction, the stopping, the freezing, however you want to describe that moment where you end up where you were a moment ago, as a practical fact. And how else did, like I said, the dancing analogy I think just does explain it, that this balance thing, you know, takes a certain amount of time, and when you unbalance it, you will consume time with each rotation of the imbalance. But that's all that's happening. There's no change in the external world. Time hasn't changed. Your matter changes. So as you gain, and these effects only really happen in a dramatic way when you get up to really important speeds. And you know, so that's why we don't have anything to correlate this to. Humans couldn't do any of this as a practical matter just because they can't go fast enough without degrading their physical structure. They would fall apart materially before they could go into space and come back, kind of a thing. I'm just trying to think of a scenario where it would be possible for the difference in time to be substantial enough, the aging process, where you could do that at a slow enough velocity. And I think the problem is you're still going to be aging, and you're just going to be aging slower, but you're not going to be aging slow enough for you ever to come back and see the difference, because you won't be able to go fast enough to age slow enough. I suppose that would be a good way to put it. You'll come back and it'll be 10 minutes difference. You know, it won't be 700 years difference or all that stuff, because you'll never be able to go fast enough to do more than a few minutes worth of difference. Yeah. So I guess this is enough of a video. So these are all just like separate subjects. So I think I can argue that Kaku's description of what a photon is wrong. Okay, light is just a frequency of gravity. And I think a second argument could be made that time dilation is this. You know, these are all separate, but to really understand the whole thing, it's just so much simpler if you just understand it from its basic dynamic, which is it's just exchanges of directional information. And the key thing that makes the whole thing work is this idea of this this perfectly consistent pressure. You know, and that anytime you create a point in anywhere in the field, you create something that arrows are going to hit, and they're only going to hit it from a direction. You know what I'm saying? Nothing can come out from you. Everything will be coming in towards you. It'll always seem like a pressure, and that pressure will instantly create a tendency to force things together because it's all in straight lines. And so there's the shadowing effect happens. So the particles will be forced into relationships. And I'm just saying that principle is so, I think, solid. And there was a principle understood more than 200 years ago, maybe 300 years ago, as conceptually, but they just didn't have the capacity to think of it in terms of frictionless kinetic exchanges of direction. And that's what makes it all make sense, is this idea of two things interacting, and the two things just exchanging direction, that the thing going this way goes that way, and the thing going this way goes this way. But what really happened was the thing going this way is now going that way, and the thing going that way is now going that way. The thing going this way is now going that way. And that makes all the difference. Even though it looks like this went that way and that went that way, it didn't. This that was going this way has now reversed its direction. And that means something. It takes time to do that. Yeah. Alright. Sorry, yeah, so I knew I was going to be in a little bit of trouble because it just, the events happening are happening on such a scale. The scale difference is just so incredible. I mean, for 1 second in our world is like 1,000,000 years in the world of these arrows. 1 billion, maybe. 1 billion events has taken place, you know, in 1 second. Snap of the finger. Trillion events. I mean, it's just a huge, huge difference. And that's the real universe. That's the universe that's really functioning. We are an illusion in the sense of, like I said, the gravity is a nuclear force. Our nuclear bits are being hit by gravity. There's no gravity affecting the Earth. The gravity is affecting the atoms in the Earth. It's affecting the protons, the neutrons, the electrons inside the atoms, inside the Earth. That's what the gravity is affecting. That's where the gravity works. It doesn't work on the big thing. It just works on the little bits. And that distance, our distance from those little bits, you know, gives us this illusion, you know, that we, you know, but you can see the pattern. Oh, there's so many things to talk about, because, you know, you think about the people who, you know, do this. I mean, I did it as a kid all the time. You think about the universe as, okay, what if the universe is just the big toe on the Jolly Green Giant? You know, it's an atom on the nail of the big toe of a Jolly Green Giant in some other universe. You know, you know, just keep extrapolating upward. And it's fun to do, but what's really happening is this is just kind of like fractals. These tendencies are so basic and so simple that the rules just keep re-arising at all these different levels. The same principles will exist because the force is so simple and so solid that you'll see the same pattern at these different scales of mass, let's call it. But it's still all just nuclear forces. And there is an end, in my opinion. It doesn't go forever, kind of a thing. And certainly doesn't go forever in terms of the actual construction. There's a lot more nuance that can take place as you get more and more complicated. Compounds, for example. There's no correlation to compounds anywhere else in the, you know, it only happens at this level of the size level of the relationships. Yeah. Yeah, good enough. Alright. So until next time. Still kind of, still can't hear, and, you know, all kinds of little problems. Yeah. Kind of a rough couple of weeks. Anyway, till next time.